You are not the only kind of human that ever walked this earth. That sentence probably feels strange. You've been taught that humans evolved, that we came from earlier primates, that there was a long chain of ancestors stretching back millions of years. But what most people don't realize is that for the vast majority of that history, we were not alone. There were others. Other people with hands and eyes and social lives and tools and almost certainly feelings. And then they were gone. This is the story of what happened to them. Roughly 300,000 years ago, your species appeared in Africa. They were Homo sapiens. But you were not the first humans, and you were not the only ones. At the same moment your ancestors were learning to survive on the African savanna, at least four other distinct human species were alive and walking the planet. The Neanderthals roamed Europe and Western Asia. The Denisovans spread across Siberia and into Southeast Asia. Homo luzonensis lived on the island of Luzon in what is now the Philippines. Homo floresiensis, a tiny 3-foot tall human species, lived on the Indonesian island of Flores. And there may have been others we haven't found yet. The world, for a long stretch of time, was shared. Paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London has spent decades reconstructing this picture. His research describes a world that looked nothing like the single species dominance we assume today. It was a world of multiple human experiments running simultaneously, each adapted to their own environment, each with their own solutions to the problem of survival. Neanderthals, in particular, were not the brutish cave dwellers of popular imagination. That image was built on a misreading of an early fossil, an old Neanderthal man with severe arthritis, whose bent posture was assumed to be his natural stance. Modern analysis has completely overturned this picture. Neanderthals had larger brains than you do. They buried their dead, sometimes with flowers. They made jewelry from eagle talons and shells. They used red ochre pigment, possibly for decoration or ritual. They made complex stone tools using a technique called levallois, which required planning multiple steps in advance. They cared for their elderly and injured. We know this because Neanderthal fossils show individuals who survived serious injuries for years, which means someone was feeding them, protecting them, keeping them alive. These were not animals. These were people. So what happened? For a long time, the answer seemed simple. Modern humans arrived and everyone else died. The assumption was that Homo sapiens outcompeted the other species, hunted the same prey faster, made better tools, communicated more effectively, and simply replaced whoever was already there. A clean story, a triumphant one. But the genetics told a different story. In 2010, geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published a landmark paper that changed everything. They had sequenced the Neanderthal genome, the complete genetic instruction manual of a Neanderthal individual who had died tens of thousands of years ago, and compared it to the genomes of living humans. What they found was not the record of a clean replacement. It was the record of contact. If you are of non-African descent, between 1 and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. It is in you right now. It shaped your immune system. It may influence how your body responds to viruses, how your skin handles UV radiation, how your blood clots. You did not replace the Neanderthals. You absorbed them. Your ancestors met them, lived alongside them long enough to have children with them, and those children survived and had children of their own, carrying Neanderthal DNA forward into a lineage that eventually became you. The same is true for the Denisovans. If you have ancestry from East Asia, Southeast Asia, or the Pacific Islands, particularly Melanesia, up to 5% of your DNA may be Denisovan. In some populations in Papua New Guinea, Denisovan DNA approaches 6%. These are not traces. These are contributions, pieces of a people who no longer exist as a distinct species living on inside the bodies of their descendants. Pääbo was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2022 for this work. What he had found was not a story of extermination, it was a story of merger. But merger doesn't fully explain what happened either, because the other species did disappear. Neanderthals were gone by around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans vanished. Homo floresiensis survived until perhaps 50,000 years ago. The small-brained Homo naledi in South Africa may have overlapped with modern humans even more recently. Something ended them. The question is what? The honest answer is that we don't know exactly, and that uncertainty is important to sit with. Climate was a factor. The period between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago was one of intense climatic instability. Ice ages advanced and retreated. Habitats shifted. Species that were adapted to specific environments found those environments disappearing. Neanderthals, adapted to the cold forests of Ice Age Europe, may have been squeezed by warming climates even before modern humans arrived in large numbers. Disease is another possibility. When two populations that have been separated for hundreds of thousands of years come into contact, they carry different pathogens. Modern humans, emerging from a continent with dense populations and diverse animal species, may have carried diseases to which other human species had no immunity. This is speculative. Disease rarely leaves direct evidence in the fossil record, but it is consistent with what we know about the catastrophic effects of contact between isolated populations throughout human history. Competition certainly played a role. Not necessarily violent warfare, though that cannot be ruled out. Even a small difference in survival rates, if Homo sapiens mothers had slightly more children, or if sapiens infants survived at slightly higher rates, or if sapiens groups could exploit a slightly wider range of foods, compounded over thousands of generations, would be enough to drive another species to extinction without a single battle. And then there is the possibility that some of it was intentional. Archaeological evidence at certain sites suggests that Neanderthals may have been hunted. Some Neanderthal bones show cut marks consistent with defleshing. Whether this was ritual, cannibalism, or violence in the modern sense is debated. But the possibility that Homo sapiens sometimes killed other humans deliberately is not one that serious researchers rule out. What emerges is not a clean narrative. It is a complicated, incomplete, deeply human story of encounter, intermingling, competition, disease, climate, and time. The other humans didn't vanish in a single event. They faded, slowly, over tens of thousands of years. Their populations shrank, their ranges contracted, and eventually, the last of them died somewhere without anyone to remember them. Except that they are remembered, just not in the way you might expect. Every time your immune system fights off a virus using a protein shaped by Neanderthal DNA, the Neanderthals are still here. Every time a person of Melanesian descent carries Denisovan variants that help their body function at high altitude, the Denisovans are still here. The species ended. The people didn't entirely disappear. Researcher Sriram Sankaraman at UCLA has studied exactly which pieces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA survived in modern humans and why. His findings suggest the DNA that persisted wasn't random. It was selected for. The pieces that stayed were the pieces that helped us survive. Better immune responses, better adaptation to new climates, better skin. The pieces that were lost were the ones that caused problems when combined with modern human DNA. The merger was not seamless, but what worked was kept. You carry the survivors of multiple human species inside your genome. The Neanderthal who survived a winter in Ice Age Europe, the Denisovan adapted to the cold, thin air of the high Asian plateau. They didn't make it as a species, but pieces of what they learned, encoded in their DNA over hundreds of thousands of years of survival, made it into you. Tonight, your immune system will quietly do its work. Your body will regulate itself, repair itself, run the ancient programs it inherited from beings whose names we don't know and whose faces we can only approximate. You will go about your life carrying the biological inheritance of people who vanished from the earth before recorded history began. You are not just one kind of human. You never were. So if you think this story hits you, then please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for more updates.